So people are saying just total fiction how Putin is using Nazi propaganda to defend invasion of Ukraine. So they're saying there's the allegation that the Ukraine military has and the government has neo-Nazis infiltrated and embraced by the government, actually. And here's the PBS NewsHour. Remember, it's funded by oligarchs and the government, so you're not getting the truth from PBS, even though you think you are. You're just as bad as anything else out there, PBS. Analysis: Putin's claim that war on Ukraine is to target Nazis is absurd. Here's why. So he says he's going to fight those Nazis. So in case you don't know what's happening, there was supposed to be an agreement in 2014 called the Minsk Agreement, which after they overthrew the government in Ukraine, they kept shelling the people in eastern Ukraine, right, who didn't want to go along with the overthrow. And so those people are ethnic Russians. So they identify with Russia, and they didn't want to be part of this new undemocratic government. And so they would shell them, and they killed 14,000 of them over the last 8 years, even though there was supposed to be a ceasefire in 2015 called the Minsk Agreement. And so Putin says he's going in to stop that slaughter of those people in the east of Ukraine, which the Ukraine government hasn't stopped shelling. Now, that is true. Now, I'm also against his invasion. War is not a good idea. So, but here, there's PBS claiming that there is the claim of Nazis is wrong. And there was also People magazine got into it. So here's Alex Rubinstein. So we're gonna lay this all out for you. This will be nice. He says, watch Yevhen Karas, the leader of Ukraine's neo-Nazi terror gang C-14's speech from Kiev earlier this month. Straight from the horse's mouth, he dispels the many narratives pushed by the left, the mainstream media, and the State Department. So he's going to brag about he's not denying he's a Nazi, and he's going to brag that of all the influence they had in the coup, and that the fact that the coup wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Nazis. Watch this. So he says Maidan was the victory of the nationalist ideas. That was the coup that took place. And he said that was the victory for the nationalist ideas. Well, what does nationalist mean? It means Nazi ideas, right? Okay. Nationalists were the key factor there, and clearly at the front lines. Now, there is a lot of speculation saying, well, there were only a few neo-Nazis. LGBT and foreign embassies are saying there were not much neo-Nazis on Maidan. Maybe about 10% of the real ideological ones. The thing is that such a thing can say only a moron that never was at war. And don't understand that those 10%, maybe even less, 8%. But how much they are and how much more effective in the proportion of influence. So he's saying, yeah, we might have only been 10% or 8%, but what was our effect? That's what he's saying. What was the proportion of our influence? How much of their effectiveness was? It was endless, he says. He says, if not for those 8% of neo-Nazis, the effectiveness of Maidan would have dropped by 90%. So he's saying most of the credit has to go to these right-wing nationalist neo-Nazis for the coup. So it's the numbers. It's not the point. Also, when they started firing on the crowds, people thought that was the government doing that. Turns out now there's lots of credible evidence that the Nazis were doing it. Like now, some left-wingers like Boll Foundation and so on, they're trying to count numbers to diminish. So the reason why they're doing that is that now the West doesn't want to recognize the Nazis in Ukraine because it's bad for them. It's a bad look. And this guy's saying something like, there were that many nationalists. They had that much influence. If not for the nationalists, that whole thing, meaning the coup, would have turned into a gay parade. That's what he said. So okay, so now there's more. Max. You want to comment on any of that?
Well, let's keep it rolling.
Okay, so here's more.
Але стільки зброї не
He says we were now been given so much weaponry, not because some say the West is helping us. So they've been given all this weaponry from the West, and some say it's because they want to help you. And he says no, that's not why.
тому, що ми хороші, як нам кажуть, нам допомагає Захід, бо вони хочуть нам блага, тому що ми виконуємо
He
задачі
says not because the West wants the best for us, but because we perform the tasks set by the
Заходу.
West.
Тому що ми єдині, хто готові
Because we are the only ones who are ready to do them.
виконувати, бо нам весело, нам прикольно
Because we have fun. We have fun killing, and we have fun fighting.
вбивати і прикольно воювати. І вони думають, вау, давайте вже, подивимося,
And they're like, wow, let's see what's going to
що це
happen.
буде. Тому виник цей новий альянс, про який зараз говорять там Туреччина.
And that is the reason for the new alliance Turkey, Poland, Britain, and Ukraine. So he's saying we're starting this whole new thing. There's going to be a whole new power alliance, and it doesn't rely on NATO.
Польща, Британія, Україна. Тут ми тут флагман. Тому що ми
We are the flagman here because we have started a war. He's taking credit for starting this war with Russia. We have started a war that has not been seen for 60 years.
війну, якої не було вже останніх 60 років. Так от, уявіть,
So imagine how many weapons we have, how many veterans that we have.
скільки в нас ветеранів. А тепер уявіть,
And imagine
зникає
Russia
Росія,
falls
вона
apart,
розвалюється. Тобто виникає
and it turns into
5
5
Росій,
different
Ні,
Russians or something
на
like that.
європейському континенті.
We have the most javelins on the European continent. Maybe only the UK has more javelin missiles than they do.
Тільки в Британії там, здається, більше. Ви розумієте, цей потенціал
The potential of those armed forces will immediately become a problem for all
цих
those who
збройних сил,
oppose
це
us,
стане проблемою зразу для всіх, хто зараз нам десь там намагається робити хеньки.
for all those who are trying to give us problems.
І оце от є наша
It is our joy and our
радість, наша
sorrow.
печаль. Чому, щоб ви розуміли,
You
чому
need
так
to
все важко?
understand
Не тому, що
why. Yes, it is hard, not because we are Ukrainians and our asses suffered for 300 years.
300 років, наша дупа страждала. Чому ж нарешті влада тут нас
Why finally everything good, not just given to us? We're such good people. So he's mocking people as being crybabies, saying that. And so, but the real reason he says,
ми хочемо в Європу. Ні.
and he said, oh, those people we want to join Europe. He doesn't want. This is what he
Величезна,
says.
потужна держава.
No, we are a huge, powerful state. And if we come to power, it will be both joy and problems for the whole world.
І якщо ми тут прийдемо до влади, це буде і радість, і проблеми для всього світу. Тому це величезна амбітна
Therefore, it is a huge, ambitious task. We live in a very cool time. I don't know what this translation means. That's a weird translation. We live in a very cool time.
Тому перед нами стоять надзвичайно
And that is why there is an extremely ambitious, cool goal. See, I don't know what that means.
амбітна, класна ціль. Не просто стати там частиною
Not just become part of a European family that has already collapsed.
європейської сім'ї, яка вже там розвалилася. А це є вже
This is about new political alliances on the global level, new political challenges.
політичні альянси.
So let's just recap what he said. Ukraine is being armed as pawns of the West because we have fun killing. We have started a war. We have the most javelins on the European continent, and the European family has already collapsed, and Maidan would have been a gay parade if not for the Nazi influence. And so that guy's the leader of the C-14s. The C-14s was started as a youth wing of the Svoboda party founded by Ole Tenahambak. Is that how do you say his name, Max? Janbach. And he's pictured there. Here he is shaking hands. So this guy, who's big neo-Nazi, shaking hands with this guy who's our president. C-14 signed an agreement with Kiev city government to patrol its streets in early 2018. And what happened? Well, months later, it began a campaign of pogroms against Romani camps. So that's gypsies, right? And so they're going around killing them.
They're beating them, and it was sort of an official city program that they went down to the train station or the train tracks and just pepper sprayed a bunch of very destitute Roma people and chased them away and brutalized them.
So let me just say C-14, the 14 in C-14 refers to the 14 words coined by American neo-Nazi David Lane. And those words are, we must secure the existence of our people and future for white children. So So the neo-Nazi Svoboda Party was co-founded by that guy I just showed you shaking hands with, Joe Biden, and a guy named Andriy Parubi, who served as the chairman of Ukrainian parliament from 2016 to 2019. So do you see where I'm getting at when I start throwing around the term neo-Nazi intertwined with their government, and was welcomed at the U.S. Senate by Joe Biden's foreign policy man, Michael Carpenter. And this is from The Nation from 2019. 5 years ago, Ukraine's Maidan uprising ousted President Viktor Yanukovych to the cheers and support of the West. Politicians and analysts in the United States and Europe not only celebrated the uprising as a triumph of democracy, but denied reports of Maidan's ultranationalism, smearing those who warned about the dark side of the uprising as Moscow puppets and useful idiots. Freedom was on the march in Ukraine. So anybody who pointed this out was called a Putin puppet and a useful idiot. Just like anybody who said Russiagate was garbage. Today, increasing reports of far-right violence, ultranationalism, and erosion of basic freedoms are giving the lie to the West's initial euphoria. There are neo-Nazi pogroms against the Roma, rampant attacks on feminists and LGBT groups, book bans, and state-sponsored glorification of Nazi collaborators. Post-Maidan Ukraine is the world's only nation to have a neo-Nazi formation in its armed forces. The Azov Battalion was initially formed out of the neo-Nazi gang, the Patriot of Ukraine. And here it is. That's their symbol. Arsen Avakov, the new Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, after the overthrow of Yanukovych's government, he issued in April 13th, 2014, a decree authorizing creating the new paramilitary force from civilians up to 12,000 people. So, and then what happened? Well, initially a volunteer militia formed as the Azov Battalion, May 2014, during the 2014 pro-Russian unrest in Ukraine. Azov has since been incorporated into its arms by Ukraine's Ministry of Internal Affairs, just like I told you. The Azov Battalion is a far-right, this is from Military Wikipedia, is a far-right, all-volunteer infantry military unit forming part of the military reserve of National Guard of Ukraine. Okay. And its first combat experience was recapturing Mariupol from the pro-Russian separatist forces in June 2014. All members of the unit are under contract of the National Guard of Ukraine. The Azov Battalion has been labeled neo-Nazi patriots, a far-right Ukrainian militia. And so they're officially a part of their military. This isn't a secret. Andy Beletsky, the gang's leader, who became Azov's commander, once wrote that Ukraine's mission is to lead the white races out of the world in a final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. Beletsky is now a deputy in Ukraine's parliament. So again, there's a lot to this accusation of neo-Nazis being in the Ukraine military and government. Beletsky is also the head of two neo-Nazi political groups, the Patriot of Ukraine and Social National Assembly. In August 2014, he was awarded a military decoration, Order for Courage, by Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, and promoted to lieutenant colonel of the Interior Ministry's police forces. Do you see what I'm talking about now? Okay. So let all the other asswipes deny this, but we're here to report it. On June 11, 2015, and you know how I super know these are real neo-Nazis? Because our own House of Representatives admitted it. In 2015, the U.S. House of Representatives passed amendments blocking any training of Azov by U.S. forces, citing its neo-Nazi background as the reason. And on June 26th, the Canadian Defense Minister declared as well that training by Canadian forces or support would not be provided to Azov. So this is our own governments admitting that they're Nazis, and they now deny it. Patrons of the battalion included Ola Lishavko and members of the Rada and Billionaire, blah, blah, blah. There's one more. While the group officially denies any neo-Nazi connections, Azov's nature has been confirmed by multiple Western outlets. The New York Times called the battalion openly neo-Nazi, while USA Today, the Daily Beast, the Telegraph, and Haaretz documented group members' proclivity. How do you say that word?
Proclivity.
Proclivity for swastikas, salutes, and other Nazi symbols. And individual fighters have also acknowledged being neo-Nazis. So I'll be bringing Max. So I don't know how much else proof that people need, but people will still deny it. Just like people still pretend that Russiagate was real, even though there's never been a shred of evidence. In fact, all the evidence goes the other way. So would you like to comment on any of that?
Well, you laid it out really well. I don't have, that much to add, except that I could go on for another hour adding detail after detail. Right. I guess I would make 3 points. The first one quickly, which is that you talked about the C-14 neo-Nazi youth wing of the Svoboda party, which is one of the largest parties in Ukraine, Svoboda. It's not a neo-Nazi party. I would call it more ultra-nationalist. The US has tried to kind of keep it out of the limelight. But, if you look at the 2014 footage of John McCain and Senator Chris Murphy on stage in Maidan Square, Ole Tianbach is standing right there with them. They're on stage with that guy. And C-14 is the youth wing of this party that carried out pogroms under the official watch of the Kiev Municipal Council in 2018 against Roma people. It's all on video. And then after the pogrom, the guy who organized it, Sergei Bondar, he was invited to America House, which is a public meeting place in Kiev, sponsored by the US government, to give a talk on the situation, the military situation. Yaron Karas, that guy delivering the rant this February about how the ultra-nationalist or neo-Nazi forces prevented Maidan from becoming a gay parade. What he meant is like they were the muscle, and everybody in the square were just kind of like liberal dupes, and they were driving the agenda, which is absolutely correct. He has been provided an audience with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, along with other ultra-nationalists, including figures from the Azov Battalion and its National Corps sort of civilian brigade, because Zelensky has a complex relationship with these characters. He pretty much has to beg them for a cooperation in the peace process that he and his administration flagrantly violated and failed to enforce. That happened in person in 2019 in a village called Zolote in the gray zone on the Donbass, in the Donbass area, where Zelensky went down to personally ask Azov battalion figures and right sector figures like Beletsky to leave in accordance with the Steinmeier formula, which called for withdrawal of troops and confidence building measures. And they just told him straight to his face, no fucking way, get the hell out of here. Like they just disrespected him. And he said, he was begging them. He said, I'm not a loser. I'm 42 years old and I'm the president and you can't do this to me. And then he just went with his tail between his legs. Then he became deeply unpopular because he kept trying to enforce these peace processes and wound up basically throwing his lot in with these forces, like banning opposition TV stations owned by Viktor Medvedchuk, who was the opposition leader, the effective leader of the Russian-speaking population, trying him for treason. But this was after these forces attacked Medvedchuk's home, attacked members of his party with rubber bullets while they were traveling through the country, wounding them, and on and on. So their agenda they kind of shifted Zelensky's agenda. And now we hear this propaganda in US media that Zelensky's Jewish, so there can't possibly be neo-Nazis with any influence in Ukraine. That's what we hear again and again and again. They're basically using Zelensky, who is this impotent, weak president who got rolled by these fascist forces and by the US, which was arming them. They're using him as a human shield, a human propaganda shield. They're using his Jewishness to cover up the reality on the ground and the reality that people in Donbass have lived through. And it's kind of disgusting when streets across Ukraine have been named after Roman Shukevich, the commander of the Ukrainian partisan army that collaborated closely with the Nazi SS and presided over so many pogroms. There have been stadiums and streets named after him, stadiums and streets named after Stepan Bandera, the founder of the Nazi-allied OUNB. He's a national hero in Ukraine. And you actually see Chrystia Freeland, the number 2 in Canada at pro-Ukraine rallies, the granddaughter of an actual Nazi collaborator who is Justin Trudeau's number 2, waving a red and black UPA fascist flag just weeks after calling the Canadian truckers Nazis and using emergency law to crush their movement. And she's waving this flag in the name of democracy. What complete hypocrisy. What a bunch of liars. The propaganda is just too unbelievable. And so finally, the situation on the ground today is very dire for the Ukrainian regular military. Their command and control structure was knocked out pretty much on the first day. They've lost control of the air. They're in complete disarray. Russia is rolling like a 40-mile convoy on Kiev. It's surrounding the eastern battlefront completely, enveloping the Ukrainian paramilitaries and military. So who's left? Who's really the main fighting force on the ground? Well, in Mariupol, which you mentioned earlier, Jimmy, this city that is near Donbass, which was taken over by Azov in 2014, it is under the complete control of these neo-Nazi forces incorporated into the Ukrainian National Guard. And there's video and testimony of them preventing civilians from leaving. And why are they doing that? Because Zelensky, who's the hero and who every liberal wine mom is now gushing over and having a, orgasming over and on their Facebook pages, Zelensky ordered all males of combat age from adolescence to age 60 to remain in the city, in their cities and in their countries and in the country to fight. And so Azov is enforcing that order. There's been video of them actually attacking civilians trying to leave Mariupol, trying to leave the fighting. And meanwhile, there and in the city of Kharkiv, they have started organizing average citizens, training them in guerrilla warfare and handing out lots and lots of weapons, small arms. What could possibly go wrong? And what could possibly go wrong when Zelensky, the hero of every American liberal, has called for the release of hardened criminals from Ukrainian prisons to participate in the battle and take those weapons? It looks like they're preparing for some kind of Syria style situation where instead of the jihadists aligned with Al-Qaeda who are backed and armed by the CIA, you have neo-Nazis leading the battle, arming citizens, and weapons just flowing through the country to destabilize another country on Russia's frontier. I don't think that's going to work out, but that seems to be the U.S. plan. And so it's totally cynical. They're trying to use these fascistic forces to lead some kind of civil war that would cause so many more deaths, so many more migrants, and so much more disaster. But the U.S. regime is willing to do anything, it seems, anything, and to spare and to any cost and see any amount of bloodshed in order to take on Putin. And that's where we're at today.